I suppose if one was being honest or nasty, one sometimes the word honesty is used as a euphemism for being nasty. One might want to draw a parallel between Boris Johnson and J.D. Vance, because both of them have in the past said quite negative things about Donald Trump, who they're now cozying up to. Boris is over there in America with Trump at the moment. Here's a photograph to prove it. And J.D. Vance, of course, depending on how you want to spell Vance, V-A-N-C-E or V-A-N-T-Z, it could be bedbug or it could be simply Tweedledee to Tweedledum, because he's now dressing almost exactly the same as Donald. And J.D. Vance in 2016 referred to Trump as a demagogue, as America's Hitler, said he'd rather vote for a dog. He's called him a moral disaster, a monster. Whereas Boris Johnson, who I thought was being quite extreme, called him ill-informed, and said that when Trump was talking about Muslims, said it was complete and utter nonsense, and that in the January the 6th riots, that Trump was completely wrong for casting doubt on the US election and encouraging his supporters to storm the Capitol, attributing the violence and the loss of life to Trump's actions. But Boris is now in America, and he's made, despite making several notable negative comments about Trump in the past, one of the most striking ones, of course, about the total shutdown of Muslims entering the entering Britain, and utter nonsense. But Boris is now there to discuss international affairs, particularly the situation in Ukraine and European defence. And the meeting is crucial given Trump's significant influence on US foreign policy and his potential return to the presidency. And Trump's recent choice of J.D. Vance, a Ukraine skeptic, as his vice presidential candidate indicates a possible shift in the US stance on the war in Ukraine. And Johnson's aim was likely to persuade Trump to maintain US support for Ukraine and European defence. Meanwhile, Farage, who has been to many of Trump's campaign rallies, and Liz Truss, who has not met Donald Trump, I think, in any significant capacity so far, are both running off to the Republican convention. The urgency in Johnson's meeting with Trump underscores the geopolitical shifts and the pressing need for Europe to bolster its defences. Europe's reliance on the US for defence has become a critical issue, especially with the potential of Trump altering US support for Ukraine and Eastern Europe, and his talk about whether or not the states in Eastern Europe are paying their whack to NATO. The upcoming UK Strategic Defence Review is essential, but immediate actions are necessary, and Europe must increase its military readiness and defence capabilities to counter potential threats from the Kremlin. The warning is clear. Preparation is paramount to avoid dire consequences. And as the current Prime Minister, Keir Starmer, must prioritise preparing the UK for potential conflicts, strengthening our military and addressing defence deficiencies should be in his immediate focus to ensure our country's safety and readiness. The current geopolitical climate demands urgent and decisive actions that cut across former friendships and former alliances and former enmities or negative comments. And with a shift in US policy under a Trump administration, Europe will be hit hard, and it's essential for European senior politicians to get to America. I think we are being extremely stupid in sending Farage and Truss to represent us. Boris is a much better choice, thank God for Boris in this particular instance. But I think really we should have Lammy over there. We should have serious governmental representation in the United States at this moment, because it is essential to prepare the way for a possible Trump administration. The emphasis needs to be on immediate, tangible steps to bolster our military capabilities, our readiness to face any potential threat, and indeed to signal to the Kremlin that this is not something that is desirable or that the Kremlin should push for. The Kremlin should be encouraged, and we should be entering into negotiation with the Kremlin. We have things to negotiate, particularly and specifically the various sanctions that we have imposed. We can lighten those, we can increase those. That is up for discussion, and we should be having those discussions around a table in the Kremlin with senior Kremlin officials, and ideally with Putin or whoever pretends to be Putin at this particular moment.